At the time this happened, I was about 16 years old and living in a small mountain town. I was driving to my friend's house one night after youth group. She lived on the darker, more rural outskirts of town. I was at a stoplight in the middle of town when I noticed a small school bus pull up behind me. I thought nothing of it at first, because sometimes smaller buses were used for sporting events. I continued driving, blasting my music, and cruising down the familiar roads. About 5 minutes later, once things started getting more rural, I noticed the bus was still behind me. I was a little more on high alert now. We were far away from any schools, and it didn't make sense for a school bus to be this far out at night. There weren't many turns or back roads in this part of town, so I just stayed my course. Within a minute or so of getting that bad gut feeling, the bus started creeping closer, almost touching my bumper. I officially started to panic. This was back when cell phones weren't great, and of course, mine was out of minutes. I began slowing down, hoping the bus would just pass me. No such luck. Instead, the creepy SOB inside this thing turned the headlights off and stayed uncomfortably close to my car. It was pitch black, and now I was being followed by a school bus with no lights on, tailgating me down a rural road. I was getting close to my friend's house, but there was no way I was going to lead this creep directly to her door. I decided to get close enough to her house that I could run there if things got really bad. Under no circumstances was I pulling into her driveway with this creepy school bus behind me, so I figured I'd drive around the area and try to lose the bus first. I turned onto a random street about half a mile from her house, and thank God there was a cop car parked on the side of the road. I looked in my rearview mirror just in time to see the bus casually drive past, not slowing down, not stopping. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Only the front of the bus was yellow. The rest of it was white, and all the windows were painted over. I made it safely to my friend's house that night. But to the stalker in the murder school bus, let's not meet ever again. This encounter happened to my mom when she was in middle school in the early 70s. Her family lived outside of town, so she rode the bus to and from school. She was in 6th grade and had a boyfriend who also rode her bus. They would sit together and hold hands, but they were never inappropriate. The bus driver took notice of their relationship and started making creepy comments. He'd ask if they kissed a lot, if they tongued, and once even asked the boy if he'd sniffed her underwear. Not knowing what to do, they tried their best to ignore him. On the last day of school, the bus route went as usual, except the driver skipped my mom's stop. When he stopped at the next house, several miles away, she tried to get off with the other girl. The kids all knew each other and were friends. But the driver stopped her, forcing her back into her seat. At every stop after that, she'd try to leave, and every time, he'd snap at her to sit back down. Soon, she was the only one left on the bus. Terrified and crying, she didn't know if she was praying out loud or just begging in her head for a way to escape. The driver ordered her to move to the front, right behind his seat. Instead, she grabbed her things and bolted to the very back. As she ran, she dropped her books in the aisle, hoping they'd trip him up if he came after her. The bus finally turned back toward her road, but then veered onto a dirt path, winding deeper into the brush. Her heart pounded. If he slowed down even a little, she was jumping out the emergency exit and running for her life. Then, through the back window, she saw headlights. Her dad's truck. "You'd better stop this bus, right now," she screamed. That's my dad behind us." The driver slammed on the brakes and flung the doors open, but she was frozen in fear. Seconds later, her dad stormed onto the bus, putting himself between her and the driver. "Go to the truck, now," he ordered. As she sat in the truck with her brother, she watched through the back window as her dad unleashed hell on that man. She'd never seen her dad angry like that before. When he finally climbed back into the truck, he hugged her so tight she couldn't breathe, and she broke down, sobbing. If her dad was scared, she knew she'd just escaped something unthinkable. It wasn't a coincidence that her dad found her. Every kid who got off the bus after her stop had run home and told their parents what happened, how the driver refused to let her off, how she'd been crying, terrified. The parents called my grandparents immediately. They never reported it to the police or the school. Instead, they went straight to the bus company owner. After that, the driver disappeared from the route. My mom always believed they kept quiet because her dad had threatened to kill him, and he didn't want that coming back on him. To his dying day, my grandfather never revealed what he said to that man. Years later, my mom was talking to her mother-in-law, we'll call her Grandma C, about a distant cousin's husband, a man from her hometown. Grandma C mentioned offhand that he was in prison for impregnating his 14-year-old stepdaughter. Then she told my mom that he used to drive a school bus in your old district. My mom said her mouth dropped. She asked for his name. It was him, the same driver. And I know what you're thinking. They should have gone to the police. He could have been stopped before he hurt his stepdaughter. Well, I thought they should have too. I believe they made a mistake. But when it was all said and done, at least the bastard ended up where he belongs, behind bars. So, I've been reading some of the other posts, so I thought I'd share my story. Just a bit of background. I'm a 25-year-old female, and this happened when I was between 15 and 16. Growing up, my family and I lived in a pretty rural area. My high school was 25 minutes away by car, so you can imagine the bus ride was even longer. It took about an hour. I had the same bus driver from middle school until I eventually got my license and could drive myself. He stayed on that route for years, even after I stopped riding the bus. The bus driver, Carl, was a little too friendly with me sometimes. He was a man probably in his mid-40s, with one of those 70s porn star mustaches. He was balding, just your stereotypical school bus driver look, I guess. Anyway, I had to catch the bus at 6:30 a.m., and my house was a good mile from the bus stop, so I had to be out the door early. Most mornings, I'd just get up, shower, fix my hair, and head out. It was a long ride, so my friend, who lived at the next stop, and I would just do our makeup on the bus. It saved us from waking up even earlier. Sometimes, getting off the bus, Carl would say things like, "Well, don't you look so beautiful today?" and stuff like that. It was creepy, but at the time, I didn't think much of it. I was always allowed to have food and drinks on the bus when other kids weren't, so I guess that kind of worked in my favor, I think. That sort of thing continued through my first 2 years of high school. Usually, I was one of the last people on the bus, one of the final stops. It always felt really awkward. Carl would try to make small talk, being overly friendly. One time, he even asked if I just wanted him to drop me off at my house, since I was the last one left. Keep in mind, my house was a mile from the actual stop. No thanks. I lied and said someone would be picking me up. I didn't want him knowing where I lived. I'd usually sit in the back and ask him to turn the music up, just to avoid talking. Of course, that led to him trying to talk to me about music. I mentioned once, during one of those uncomfortable conversations, that I liked classic rock, like Pink Floyd. Then one day, as I was getting off the bus, Carl handed me a mix CD he had made for me. That was weird. I mean, like, what the actual fuck? You're my bus driver. I don't know you personally, you just drive me to school. He even put strange songs on it, like Love Shack. I tried to downplay it and convince myself he was just being nice, but it still felt off. Fast forward to when I finally got my driver's license. Thank God. No more riding the bus. Sometimes, I'd pass the bus on the road and see Carl driving, waving at me. Whatever, no big deal. So one weekend, I was working at McDonald's, and in walks Carl with some kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He's like, "Oh hey, how you doing? Miss you on the bus," and other blah blah type small talk stuff. I smiled and tried to be polite, but inside I was screaming, "Please shut the hell up." I gave him his food, and he sat down with that poor kid for like an hour. Who stays in a fast food place that long anyway? Okay, maybe some people do, but something just felt weird about it. Finally, Carl gets up and leaves. Not even 10 minutes later, he walks back in, but without the kid this time. Then he comes up to the counter and says, "Are you getting off soon? My car won't start, and I was wondering if you could give me a ride home." My heart dropped. I was stuck. All I could picture was myself dead in a ditch somewhere. Then he added, "I only live 15 minutes away." I panicked and lied, saying I have to work overtime, so I wouldn't be getting off for a few more hours. In reality, I was due to clock out in 10 minutes. I told my manager, and they had someone walk me to my car. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She was irate. She called the bus barn. That's what they called the school district transportation center where he worked. The woman on the phone told my mom something that really creeped me out. Apparently, that same day, the school district bus drivers were holding a food drive at the grocery store right next to McDonald's I work at. There was even a big yellow bus outside with the school district's name on it. So yeah, he knew they were there. He could have walked 200 feet and asked any of his coworkers for help. But instead, he came back inside alone and asked a teenage girl, who used to be his student passenger, for a ride home. Something wasn't right. I don't know what would have happened if I'd said yes, but every instinct I had was screaming danger. I saw Carl again about 4 years later when I was working at a sporting goods store. As soon as I saw him, I thought, seriously? I'm still not done with you? He came up and gave me a hug, just grabbed me. It was so uncomfortable. After that, any time I saw him in the store, I'd hide. The last time I saw him was 5 years ago. Thank God. My brother, who also used to ride his bus, worked at that same sporting goods store. Carl would come in and always ask about me. "How's your sister? Where's she working now?" It was constant, even up until about a year ago when my brother finally quit. The whole experience was just off. Carl never did anything outright, but he gave off a really unsettling vibe, like something wasn't wired quite right. Looking back, I don't know if I was ever actually in danger when I was around him, but it felt like I could have been. And as I write this, that's enough to make my skin crawl. Even now, all these years later. was 10 years old. I'm a 32-year-old female now. My family relocated from Delaware to South Carolina for my dad's job. We lived near all our family and had never moved before. One of Dad's selling points about the move was that people in the South are so friendly. I had just finished 5th grade and would be starting 6th in South Carolina. I rode the bus to and from school in Delaware, and so there wasn't a lot of anxiety about riding the bus after we moved. 6th grade started, and I was excited about my new school and loved my teacher. Dad was right. People in the South are polite and friendly. Well, most of them are. Anyway, one day in the fall, I got off the bus at my stop after school, and a man in a dark green, creepy-looking VW Beetle that was behind the bus. It pulled off the main road and called out to me as I was walking toward my house. I turned around and probably even smiled at him. I had no real stranger danger fears at the time. I walked up to the driver's side of his car to see what he wanted. I figured he wanted to ask for directions or something, and I planned to tell him I just moved here and didn't know. But, oh boy, he didn't need directions. He was after something entirely different. He smiled at me and said something I didn't catch, comprehend, or understand. So I said, "Excuse me?" trying to get him to repeat his question. I got a little closer so I could hear him better, and he said, "Wanna fuck?" So, at the time, I didn't know what that meant, except that maybe I kind of did, and knew that was a bad word and I didn't want to, whatever fuck was. I turned and ran to my neighbor's house and didn't look back. I was crying, and they called my mom, and my parents called the police about it. A couple of days later, the police department had a sketch artist come meet my parents and I at the station to work with me. I did the best I could, but honestly, I wasn't studying the man's features or even trying to remember his face at the time of the incident. So, I don't know how accurate it was. My parents and I thought that was the end of it. Nobody really thought they would find him. The cops were saying things like, if they found him, he could go to jail for a while for his obscene question to me. My mom was nervous that if it came to that, I would have to go to court to testify, and she didn't feel good about putting me through that. She was worried that, even as an undeveloped 10-year-old child, the defense would attempt to shame me in some way, or say I was asking for it. About a week later, I was again getting off the bus, and I hear a car horn beep. I look to see, and it was the same guy, same creepy VW Beetle, smiling and waving at me. I was absolutely stunned, because I thought no way he would show his face around here again. But there he was. I blankly waved back for some reason, but at the same time I was memorizing his tag number. I repeated it to myself over and over as I ran to my house to write it down and call Mom. Cops were notified, and the guy was identified. He lived about 20 minutes away in another town. His local cops knew him and were friendly with his family, the good old boy system, so he didn't go to jail. But apparently, he was given a warning and was told to stay away from me. I never saw him again, and hope I never do. I wonder how many times he might have followed the bus and watched me that I never even knew about. So to the dark green VW Beetle Predator, let's never meet again.